Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel, in our beautiful, biblical, eternal, and indivisible capital, Jerusalem, since King David's time. Today I am with one of my favorite journalists and authors who has such biting, truthful insight that unfortunately gets ignored by too many people, but it's thanks to her that so many people are more awake to reality today. The one and only Melanie Phillips. Shalom, Melanie.
Hello, Avi. Very good to be back with you again.
It is a pleasure having you. Always a pleasure reading everything you're putting out there that is just like water to the soul, to be able to understand what's going out there. Is just most of the information really is so off base. I guess let's talk about this. Let's start with this. Right now, we're dealing with Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C. with President Trump. Ceasefire talks, again, that are not good for Israel, but I know a bigger plan is being taken care of for the whole Middle East, and somehow there's a price we have to pay in the meantime. Potential talks with Abraham Accords for Syria, which makes no sense to me, but again, it's part of this whole bigger plan, but it's another ISIS entity that somehow we're being forced to live with as opposed to taking care of or not dealing with as a potential normalization partner. And then the big issue for me is Qatar. Qatar is still being treated like a trustworthy broker, mediator, when anyone with a brain knows that Qatar is the state sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas, October 7th happened because of Qatar support. If we wanted our hostages back, Trump all he has to do was threaten Qatar. And here we're 2 years in, and Qatar is still being treated as a mediator of negotiation for ceasefire, which makes no sense whatsoever. And Israel is playing this game, even though it's totally immoral. Love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I have very similar thoughts about all this. Qatar strikes me as quite extraordinary, the extent to which America and Israel, for that matter, treat it as an honest broker, as an interlocutor in this whole thing. When, as you say, on October the 8th, all America had to do was to threaten Qatar, and the whole thing would have been over. Qatar is Hamas, so what on earth are they doing? So I can only think that, Qatar for years has played an extremely effective and shrewd game, a bit like the Chinese. You make yourself as a nation, as a country, indispensable to the West because you buy up large amounts of it and you keep its infrastructure going. You buy up large chunks of its universities, and I mean, in Britain, it's all over the place. Qatar's munificence, and it comes with a price because you basically Qatar has locked the West in to its deadly embrace.
Right, and you're not even mentioning all of the politicians that have been, in a sense, bought out,
for sure.
And all the PR firms and the lobby firms in Washington D.C.
For sure, it all goes together. So I cannot understand what's going on here. Israel seems to play a kind of double game in all this. On the one hand, they speak badly of Qatar, as they should. On the other hand, they have sucked up to it themselves and used it as an honest broker. So I really don't understand that at all. But it's part of a more general concern I have, that, on the one hand, who would have thought nearly 2 years on, Israel would be in as strong a position as it is, militarily speaking. None of us would have imagined that the Hezbollah would have been decimated, that the Hamas would be all but beaten, that Iran would have been reduced to, I wouldn't say it's a paper tiger, I think it is still a tiger, but nevertheless a tiger that has for the moment been defanged. Nobody would have thought that, and Israel's in a very strong position. However, it is still the middle of the war. And what worries me is that President Trump, who, we must all be extremely grateful that he stepped up to the plate when he did, that America bombed Fordo and the other two large nuclear sites in Iran, without which, Israel couldn't have done that degree of damage, at least not as fast as
Right.
it was done. However, from everything that President Trump has said subsequently, the impression that he gives is that, well, then it's all over now. Iran has been dealt with. It can no longer present the threat that it did. And now we must move on to the new challenge of reassembling the architecture of the Middle East to produce permanent peace. Well, I'm all in favour of that. But Iran isn't dealt with. On the contrary, while the regime is still there, it remains a mortal threat, not just to Israel, but to America.
Right.
It has untold numbers of agents, sleeper agents, in place throughout the West. In Britain, my place of birth, the security service has given a number of warnings now that they are extremely concerned that Iran has so many terrorists in place in Britain, and they're trying to watch them. It's a mortal threat. Plus, while the regime is in place, it can reactivate its nuclear program. I'm sure I'm not the only one to suspect that people as shrewd and playing such a long game as the Iranians do, I would fully expect them to have other sites, very secret sites, where they have centrifuges. We know that there is a question mark over the uranium, the processed uranium, the enriched uranium that may or may not have been buried in Fordo. And, you know, I was seeing the other day a report which said, here is a picture, here are photographs, a video of planes coming in from China who are delivering new rocket launchers. Well, who can be surprised? So this is an ongoing process. This war isn't over. And it worries me that if President Trump thinks it is over, and if he thinks you can do a deal with Iran, and this is my final point, is the underlying point of my unease with President Trump, because I believe that his heart does lie with Israel and the Jewish people. I believe that is genuine. However, he seems to believe that every conflict in the world is a potential deal which he can do because he masters the art of the deal. Mm-hmm. As I recall, the disastrous 2015 nuclear deal with Iran that was brokered by President Obama, Trump then said, this is a terrible deal, I could have done one that's much better. Well, no, the point about a deal with Iran is that any deal with Iran is bad, because you do not make a deal with the devil. Iran, the Iranian regime, has a non-negotiable agenda, which is genocide of the Jews, the destruction of Israel, and the conquest of the West. They believe that they are under a sacred duty to perform all these things. There is no negotiating with these people. You cannot negotiate with fanatics, religious fanatics. And I don't think anyone in the West actually really gets that. Certainly the British don't get it. Right. And I don't think Mr. Trump, President Trump, gets it, because he seems to think that you can do a deal with anyone. So you can do a deal with the Iranian regime, which, as I say, is religious fanatics, and you can do a deal with Hamas, which we're seeing now. We're seeing another ceasefire deal. Now, this is a terrible situation. This is a terrible, terrible situation, because the reason that Israel has not been able to complete its destruction of Hamas as a military force in Gaza is very simple. They have the hostages. And as long as they have any hostages, they have the trump card, use that word in its real sense, because they know that Israel is stuck. Now, this is a terrible thing. But, so, you know, in my view, Mr. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, should have been much more upfront with the country from the start. He should have said, look, we have a sacred duty to redeem these hostages. We have a sacred duty to rescue them. We will do absolutely everything we can to do that. But we also have a sacred duty to protect the 10 million inhabitants of Israel. And it's possible that we can't do both. And if it comes to it, we have to protect Israel. He should have said that from the start. He hasn't. He's never said that. He is still giving the impression that, yes, we will defeat Hamas completely and forever, and we will redeem the hostages. Well, how is he going to do that when while they have them, they have the cards in their hand?
Right.
So the only way through this, as you suggest, is to go through Qatar and to say to Qatar, unless those hostages are released now, you're out of here. But why doesn't the West do that? Well, it can only be because they think that their whole economy will collapse, perhaps. I don't know. I have no idea why. But that's the only way through this.
Right.
So the idea of deals with these people, whether it's Iran, whether it's Hamas, strikes me as very, very difficult and very dangerous. But who knows? Maybe we will see in the next few days the architecture arise before us of a new regional settlement in which all these things are taken care of. Perhaps. We don't know.
Well, that does bring up a good point. And I want to go back to Trump, but I just want to focus on Iran for a second, because what we did experience was total smoke and mirrors from Trump and Netanyahu regarding the direct conflict with Iran and the attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities. Meaning no one knew where that came from, and everyone was saying it wasn't going to happen. And it was done by Israel. Israel led the way with total support from the Trump administration. And then the Trump administration joined in with the actual attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities. So there's definitely smoke and mirrors taking place.
Sure.
And especially like moving forward with Iran, like you know, and I know, and any thinking person knows, the only safe future for the world, not just for Israel and the Middle East and the Sunni countries, is if there is regime change to the Islamic Republic of Iran, that America is not going to be involved in doing. It's up to the Iranian people, and who knows what Israel or America are doing under wraps behind the scenes to make that happen, or if we're going to have to attack Iran again because they're continuing with now Chinese assistance. So I do believe things are happening that we don't know about and continuing so, but it's still on the, not just on the moral basis, but on the real politic basis to end the evil that is up against all of us. And again, you've been saying this for decades, even before I had a voice, that the jihadi Islamic world was destroying the West. And you saw that for decades. And so the biggest problem of the Western world, by not standing up for the truth about the evil, is forget about Israel and the Jewish people. We're going to be okay. Well, we got God looking after us. We've survived everything up until now. We're going to survive. But it's the West itself that's going to self-destruct because its own leaders, including President Trump today, not saying what's necessary to help Americans be protected. And I know you have a lot to say about that because you just wrote a book, basically, on top of all the other 6 or 7 books you've written that touches upon that. So what insights do you have right now based on that?
Well, my book isn't about anything to do with President Trump. And apropos President Trump, I think he's doing more to protect America than, for example, the British government is to protect Britain in terms of Islamic radicals in America. I mean, at least Trump is, he's taking action to throw people out if they are extremists, if they're illegal immigrants, if they're terrorists. Terrorist sympathizers, and he's taking action against the universities, which have been propping up and encouraging and incentivizing, I would say, sanitizing Islamic terrorism since the beginning of since October 7, 2023.
But that's still a challenge to do so if you're not willing to call out Qatar, and Qatar is one of the major funders of the university.
For sure, that is true, but it's a lot better, a lot more. He's doing a lot more than is being done in Britain, where yesterday there was the solemn anniversary of the 7/7 bombings in London, in which dozens of people died in tube and underground and bus bombings, suicide bombings. And, there were ceremonies and there were solemn speeches and there were prime ministerial statements and other statements, and nobody mentioned Islam. Absolutely astonishing. I mean, we had these suicide bombings. I think there were 4. They came from nowhere. Perhaps it was, vegans protesting about something. I mean, what on earth? So that's where Britain is, which is a really, really bad place. So my book is not specifically about what we're talking about. It's about kind of what's led the West into this suicidal posture that it's taken. Not simply because of Islam or predatory Islam, Islamism, political Islam, has seen that the West has hollowed itself out, has created a vacuum. And it understands that a society that's created a vacuum, a society that, in my view, has taken a wrecking ball to its core institutions and values for decades, that society no longer knows what it is, it no longer knows what it stands for, it despises what it once thought it stood for, and therefore it is not going to defend itself, it's not going to fight for its survival. So it's an open goal, and into which the Islamists have moved and are moving. So my book is about how on earth the West has got itself into this situation, and I present it through the prism of the reaction by the West to the October 7, 2023 massacres here in Israel, because when I looked at that reaction, which has been horrendous ever since, seeing how very large numbers in the West have presented Israel, which was the target and victim of genocidal attack and remains targeted by genocidal attack, how the West presented its absolutely just war and overwhelmingly necessary defense against that as aggression, and rather than Israel being the victim of war crimes, which indeed it has been, thousands of war crimes, every missile launched against it is a war crime because it's launched specifically to murder civilians, it is accused of war crimes. So I watched this grotesque, lunatic response, and it seemed to me that what we were all watching was the complete extinction in that response of justice, conscience, and rationality. And I realized that that's precisely the conclusion I'd come to about what the West had done to itself over all these decades in destroying conscience, justice, and rationality. No such thing as right and wrong, no such thing as objective truth, openness therefore to lies, everything's a matter of opinion, truth replaced by power, and so on. And it seemed to me, and this is what I've written in the book, that, you know, the elites in the West have taken a wrecking ball to the institutions of the West because they believe that the West and the Western nation state were born in the original sins of colonialism and imperialism and all that stuff. And consequently, they attacked the structures that would enable a society to continue to exist, such as the education system, as a transmission of the culture, such as the traditional family as the best way of producing individuals who are healthy enough to continue the culture, the attack on the nation itself, replacement of, or not replacement, but superseding laws passed by national parliaments in favour of universal laws passed by arbitrated by universal courts and presided over by the sanctified United Nations, on the basis that, you know, the brotherhood of man was what we all should be replacing the nation with. And it was obvious to me that at the very root of that onslaught was an onslaught on the core values of the West. And where are the core values of the West from? Well, you could say that Christianity is the foundational creed of the West, that's true, but Christianity didn't spring from nowhere. Christianity is basically an offshoot of Judaism. And the values that everybody should hold dear in the West, which I think are civilized values, not just Western civilized values, well, civilized values, come from the Hebrew Bible. And so it's not surprising that if the West's been doing that to itself for decades, it's not surprising that Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people themselves should be in the eye of the storm. And here's the thing, that the West, in my view, is literally committing suicide. It is wiping itself out. It's not even reproducing itself.
Right.
If the West wants to save itself, and I don't know whether it does, but if it does, then it has to reconnect to the Jewish people and to the values of Judaism. It has to say to itself, realize how far it has strayed from those values into areas which have been not just repudiating the Hebrew Bible, but are self-destructive of the West. And it has to do, if it doesn't do that, it's finished. But if it does that, it could actually call upon the Jewish people to give it some parental guidance, if you like, because what the Jewish people have done, the unique selling point of the Jewish people over centuries, is cultural survival. That's what we've done. We've survived everything that could possibly be thrown at us. Every civilization and culture that's tried to destroy us has actually vanished, and we're still here and have recreated not just our own ancient national kingdom, recreated it as our national homeland, but it's now the regional power. It's become the power in the region. I mean, this is astounding from a remnant that came out of the ashes of the Holocaust. So we know how to keep a cultural show on the road.
Right.
And we can say to the West, look, we're part of you. We created you in large measure. You can learn from us about how you can save yourselves. And guess what? Your values are our values. So that's what my book is about. And October 7, brought it into sharp focus. But I was already working on it before October 7 happened.
Oh, wow.
I reframed it because I realized that it was, October 7, as I've said in the book, and I've said in many pieces I've written subsequently, October the 7th threw down a challenge to the West.
Right.
Do you support civilization or barbarism? And I'm afraid they have not supported civilization.
Right.
And so that's where we're at. It's at a kind of inflection point. Will it finally wake up?
Right. And the fascinating thing, again, the barbarism of October 7th is so clear. So clear to the point where those barbaric Islamo-Nazi terrorists literally live streamed their atrocities.
Yeah.
So it's impossible to ignore the evil that was...
But millions are ignoring it.
Right.
They're not just ignoring it, they're denying it.
And they're supporting it.
So it brings to mind something I didn't live through, but I've read about it, which was a sort of parallel madness produced by Stalinism, where people, mainly, educated, idealistic people, rather like they are today,
right,
would not hear, would not look, would not register what was going on. And indeed, that wasn't live streamed on GoPro cameras.
Right.
So you could say, well, they knew less. That was true.
Right.
But nevertheless, when people brought it to their attention, it was like, no, this is creating the new world. This is progress. This is a new type of wonderfulness in society and mankind. Very similar, but this is more mad because the evidence is there. It's on camera. We can all see it, and even if they see it, they refuse actually to see it. So what's going on here? It's a pathology. It's an absolute madness.
Right, which I think makes the premise of your book so much more powerful. Like, yes, the Western world, the elites of the Western world, consciously have decided to support, whether active support or via their silence support, barbarism, when it's all right in front of them, still to this day, about Gazans being used as human shields by Hamas and Qatar, and still silence. It's Israel is the bad guy. It's like it's so clear, and the focus of your book is totally highlighting that in this context. Amazon.com. Where does everyone purchase it?
Yeah, on Amazon. It's called The Builder's Stone: How Jews and Christians Built the West and Why Only They Can Save It. It's published in America by Wicked Sun, but it's published by print on demand. When you buy a copy on Amazon, it gets printed.
Got it.
So you go to Amazon and buy it.
All right, this is a must order, must read book. Definitely. Everyone, immediately go purchase it today.
That's the wisest thing you've said.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment, Melanie. So, final question. Can't leave without asking this question. The author of Londonistan, right? You saw exactly what was happening to London, England, the Britain, the West. New York City now has a very, very realistic potential of having its first jihadi Muslim socialist. You see the red-green alliance totally, right? Mayor coming up in the upcoming elections, and this Mamdani. What words of warning, caution, brilliance do you have for our fellow New York Jews who still happen, and all New Yorkers, but especially the New York Jews who happen to be the largest Jewish community in any city in the diaspora outside of Israel today?
Okay, so I know about the political makeup of the New York Jews, and I have every sympathy for them because they now have a very difficult choice to make. If they vote, as they have done tribally, for the Democrat, and if, so they are going to elect somebody who is not just a bad person, not just poisonous in his views, but somebody who is a mortal threat to Jews and to America, and who has subscribes to the ideologies which are all about the destruction of Israel, the destruction of Jews, and the destruction of America. If they vote Democrat, that's what they're going to be voting for. They have got to suck it up this time. They've got to, mix my metaphor, bite the bullet. They've got to vote for the other guy, whoever the other guy is. Now, I hope it's not going to be Mr. Cuomo, because, I mean, well, that was yeah. So to go back, I was looking at this fight between Mamdani and Cuomo, and thinking, I mean, this is just grotesque. If I was a New Yorker, I would say, well, I can't vote for Cuomo because he is a sleazebag and he's a failed politician. So, you know, I could see how Mr. Mamdani was so much more attractive. He took great care to present a menu of policy promises, which, okay, they were completely unrealistic, but they seemed to be addressing the concerns, the everyday concerns of New Yorkers. It was a very shrewd campaign. He is very personable, he's attractive, he's very articulate, he's very charming. So it was like no contest, as you could see how it was no contest. But now, you know, now we know. Now, you know, there is no excuse for anybody not understanding what's going on here. And so I don't know about the Republican candidate, you know, and how attractive a proposition he will be. But it doesn't matter. Mamdani has to be stopped. And any Jew who votes for him is voting for somebody who is going to cause great harm to America and to the Jewish people. And Jews of Jews of New York have to understand that. They've got to put their normal political hat to one side, and they have to hold their nose and vote for somebody who will keep him out of office. So
let me ask this follow-up question. Based on your knowledge of London Jewry, do you see New York Jewry acting any different than London Jewry? With potentially voting for Mamdani or not voting Mamdani?
Well, the British Jews did not take my advice at the last general election. They all voted for Keir Starmer and his Labour Party. And it's a different demographic to the American Jews, most of whom I think are Democrat voters, 70%, something like that.
Yeah.
So about the same sort of 60-odd% in previous years of British Jews voted for the Conservative Party. They're not sort of tribally affiliated to the Labour Party, to the left, in the way that American Jews are, for a variety of reasons. However, at the last general election, by common consent, the Conservative Party was completely finished. It had presided over many, many years and through different prime ministers. A collapse of Britain as a functioning institution. I mean, the country was literally swimming in sewage. Its rivers and seas were swimming in sewage. I mean, like, it was just such a metaphor. It was was real and it was a metaphor. And so, everybody thought we can't possibly vote for the Conservative Party. And so the Jews voted for Labour. Now, I wrote at the time, this is a terrible, terrible mistake. You think it's now safe to vote for Labour because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn was long gone. Keir Starmer appeared to be a safe pair of hands. Well, he's not a safe pair of hands. He's a human rights lawyer. I mean, human rights lawyers are, I'm afraid, the whole human rights establishment, the human rights / humanitarian establishment globally has turned against the West and has turned against Israel. And they are, it's a really bad situation. And Keir Starmer, he still has radical ideas. He doesn't really rate the nation state. He was a Remainer. He voted against Brexit. He believes, in the brotherhood of man, all that sort of rubbish. And that only leads to one destination, which is he's not going to protect the Jews. And indeed, it's led him straight down the rabbit hole of having to kowtow to the Islamist bloc in Britain, which is now extremely powerful. At the last general election, people were astounded, I wasn't, but other people were, to find that there were no fewer than 5 members of parliament who were elected on a Gaza-Palestine platform. Like, what on earth is this?
There's nothing to do with Britain, regular life,
nothing to do with
nothing.
Britain. Suddenly we had in Britain Islamic sectarian politics. And it's a thing. And Starmer, looking at the erosion of his support he once would have taken for granted the Muslim vote. So now he can't take it for granted because they're going to elect their own people with an Islamic, radical Islamic agenda. So he is moving in that direction. So, and this was always going to be on the cards. I mean, I didn't see the arrival of 5 Islamist members of parliament, but nevertheless, I saw the general direction. We could all see the general direction. We all knew that the Labour Party was moving in that direction. It was already making noises about putting teeth behind the alleged crime of Islamophobia, which is the suppression of any critical or dissenting analysis or comment about the Islamic world. That was always clear to people like me, but not to the Jews who preferred to believe the fantasy that it was all going to be okay now because the Labour Party got rid of these terrible Corbynistas. I mean, they could not have been more wrong. Talk about buyer's remorse. I mean, they are now living through they are living through a situation which, they're shell-shocked. They don't know how to deal with it. They're not prepared to leave, for which I fully understand. It's very, very difficult to pack up and leave. And they're still hoping that it's not quite as bad as they think, but with every week that passes, more and more terrible stuff appears. I mean, who would have thought that at Glastonbury, the alternative rock shows, festivals, with people who are basically, knitted organic yogurt vegan people, you would have not only a rapper who would chant death, death to the IDF, following a slew of terrible anti-Semitic comments about terrible Jews he'd known. Death, death to the IDF, right? Chanted by tens of thousands of people, chanting for the murder of not just Israeli soldiers, but a conscript army and reservists. If you count all of those, you're talking about a very, very large number of Israelis, Jews, being murdered. The call for that shocked everybody, including those who speak hatefully about Israel. It shocked them. I mean, where did that come from? Well, it's obvious. If you spend, week after week indulging in and adding to people who are saying that the Israelis are wantonly killing children, then it follows that the Israelis are truly evil people who should not be allowed to exist, and that anyone who supports them, i.e. the vast majority of British Jews, are also evil. So what did they expect?
Right.
But of course, people don't think like that.
Right.
And so the Jews of Britain are facing this horrendous situation, and it's not going to get any better.
Right.
So this is a terrible thing.
And my words to my fellow New York Jews is, you want to see what New York's going to turn out like if you go down this path with Mamdani? Look at London.
Yeah, well, years ago, I quite often go to America to promote books and to undertake speaking engagements. So, over the years I've done several trips to America to talk to groups. And the Jewish groups would always say to me, how bad are things in Europe?
Mm-hmm.
How bad are things in Britain? Don't the British Jews realise what's happening? And I would say to them, it is bad, yeah, it's really bad. But you think you're okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're just a few years behind. And they would say, no, nothing bad could happen to us. This is America. Okay, so now we have Mr. Mamdani in New York, and we see what America has become and is becoming. We see what the Democratic Party has become.
Right.
And that's the problem that the Americans have, is the Democratic Party. Like in Britain, it's the Labour Party, but it's the progressive world, which unfortunately too many Jews are signed up to, because they really don't understand what it actually involves.
Right. So I want to end this talk today on the positive. And before we started recording, you mentioned how you were here in Israel during the direct conflict, that 12-day direct conflict. I don't like the 12-day war, because we're in a war for over 600 days that was planned by Iran.
And we're still in it.
So I don't like this 12-day war. So the 12-day direct conflict with Iran, with ballistic missiles landing all over Israel, having to run to our safe rooms at least twice, 3 times a night for 12 days. And can you share what you were saying about your feelings, and from your perspective, you feeling that way about being here in Israel during those 12 days?
Yeah, well, I'm a fairly nervous person. I tend to be, I don't take kindly to missiles coming in my direction. I'm sure nobody does. But, there are some people who are more phlegmatic, and I'm very nervous. And I was frightened. I mean, okay, I was in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was pretty well spared. But nevertheless, we didn't know it was spared at the time. And, you could hear the booms of the missiles being intercepted. We hoped they were being intercepted. We didn't know whether they were falling on...
Right. And definitely flying over Jerusalem and our area in Judean hills.
And there we were, going downstairs, into our underground shelter. And I was very nervous, and I'm still nervous. I hear a sound like a motorcycle that sounds like the beginning of a siren. I'm startled.
Right.
And I went to London for a week last week, and I was still listening for the siren. And indeed, at one occasion, my phone went off with a siren because I was still plugged into the siren.
Right, so from Israel.
Right. So it was frightening. I wouldn't have been anywhere else. I felt such a privilege to be here. I was so pleased to be here. Why? Because this is where I think Jewish history is being made in a way that none of us thought we would see. I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know how it's unfolding now even. I'm guessing what's happening. But I do believe this is a seismic moment for the Jewish people in the world. Okay. And this is where it's happening. This is the very center of what's going on in the Jewish world. This is where Jewish history is being made around me being here. And there is such a sense of solidarity and of being one people and being part of the people. I'm not for a moment suggesting that people in the diaspora, Jews in the diaspora, aren't concerned. They don't, that they are anxious. A lot of them have family here and so on. Okay, that's that experience. But here it's quite different.
Right.
Because the feeling of being enveloped in mutual love of each other, and love of the land, and love of what the land and what we all represent, which is these generations that are behind us. And, you know, our soldiers have said this. We feel the shades of the generations behind us who fought and died in large measure because of their love for the Jewish people and their determination that it should survive. And I feel this happening now, right now, this determination we're going to survive, we're going to get through this. The cost is already terrible. It may be even worse, but one way or another, we are going to come through because we are the eternal people and this is our eternal homeland. And that feeling is so priceless. And even though, you know, I'm frightened, the optimism from being here is astounding. I mean, you know, I go back to London and I look at, you know, British Jews and I feel for them. They don't have that.
Right.
They don't have that optimism. They don't have the certainty we're going to come through this. They're looking around quite reasonably saying, how are we going to survive this? What should we be doing? And, you know, they're huddling together, but around them, the society around them is not with them.
Right.
It is increasingly against them. Okay, there are many good people in Britain, in the non-Jewish community, who do understand and who are sympathetic. But nevertheless, you feel it. You feel that, you know, we're among strangers who don't have our back. Here, we all have each other's back.
Right.
You know, and that feeling is so priceless. So it's a privilege to be here. I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad I've got back from being in my week in London. You know, I go back, as you know, I go back and forth to London very frequently. But it's made a great difference to my whole sense of well-being, being here. Isn't it amazing? Being under missile attack has increased my sense of well-being. Go figure.
That's what it means to be a Jew today. A Jew today in our whole, back as sovereign in our ancestral homeland. It's an out-of-body, belief-based reality that there is no rational thinking behind it. It's just something that you've just expressed so well.
Well, that's how I feel.
Melanie Phillips, everybody, the one and only. Go to Amazon, order that book today.
Definitely.
What's the name of the book again?
The Builder's Stone, How Jews and Christians Built the West and Why Only They Can Save It. You get it from Amazon.
There you go. Everyone, thanks so much for watching another episode of Pulse of Israel. Shalom, everyone. If you are not yet a subscriber to our daily, belief-based, inspiring, politically incorrect, truthful videos about Israel, the Jewish people, and the freedom-loving world, what are you waiting for? Go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe today. And yes, we are a donor-based operation. We need your donations for support in order to make these videos and get our videos seen and do all the work we do. So every once in a while, whether a large donation or a small donation, just go to pulseofisrael.com and click on the donate button. Shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.